I am not the same man 10 years into it that I was when I got married. And a lot of that is because we've allowed each other to grow and change. But yet our core values are still there. So it's gonna be work. This is the other thing I'll say. Like there's no guarantees in marriage. Like you have to put in the reps, you have to put in the work. And it just shows when you can go through something very challenging together and come out the other side, that tells a lot.
My friend, thank you for being here. You matter. You don't hear it enough, but your role as a father is critical in this world. Our world is in desperate need of identity and leadership. And you as a father get to set that in your home and empower your children to see and know who they are. So thank you for being here, and thank you for showing up each and every day for those that have been placed in your care. 3 nuggets that I got from my conversation with Michael Diamond today are: 1, you are a grounding source in your home. 2, you create a sense of order in your home. And 3, the power of witnessing your child. Welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast, where I interview incredible fathers, gaining wisdom from their stories for you and I to grow in our craft. I'm your guide, Ned Shout, father to 5 kiddos, currently ages 11 to 18, and husband to my rad wife, Sarah, working on our 20th year of marriage. So yep, I'm in the thick of it, and I am working daily to rebel against the low expectations for fathers. Okay, let's just do this part again. Welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast, where I interview incredible fathers, gaining wisdom from their stories for you and I to grow in our craft. I'm your guide, Ned Shout, father to 5 kiddos, currently ages 11 to 18, and husband to my rad wife, Sarah, working on our 21st year of marriage. So yep, I am in the thick of it, and I am working daily to rebel against the low expectations for fathers and create a world where fathers know who they are as they show up for their families. You and I have an incredible opportunity to impact our world through the way we embrace our fatherhood role. This episode is brought to you by the Adventure of Fatherhood, helping men discover their powerful fatherhood role and build their fatherhood skills. The role of the father is to serve, guide, be a steward, provide, protect, and of course, find joy and have fun in the messiness of it all. Today's guest is my new friend, Michael Diamond. We have a powerful conversation around the power and tone a father has in the home. I was very empowered personally by this conversation, and I know you will be too. Enjoy meeting my friend, Michael. Michael, welcome to Fatherhood Field Notes. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling excellent, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit. Now, first question right out the gate is, how old do you find yourself today?
Well, my pheno age says I'm 34, but my linear age says I'm 46. So I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm feeling strong. You know, it's funny. I feel healthier and more vibrant at 46 than I did at any other time in my life. So feeling powerful, feeling strong.
And I'm sure there's a ton to why you say you feel more vibrant now. But if you had 30 seconds in an elevator to tell me the 1 or 2 things that would help me to do the same thing, what would you tell me?
Yeah, eat right and exercise. That seems to be the standard formula. And take care of your nervous system. Those are the top 3 things that I would say contribute to feeling good.
Okay, so then as I'm running out the elevator, how do I take care of my nervous system? What do you mean?
Yeah, well, the nervous system coordinates, controls every single function of your entire body, regulates everything that's happening on your inner world and outer world. And when there's interference to that, you have less life expression and you're not able to function at your highest level. And we are divinely given the gift to express our light really powerfully in the world. And it's important to use the modalities to amplify that. I professionally was a chiropractor for over 20 years, and specifically network spinal analysis, which really works at the level of the nervous system. So body work, body care, anything that's hands-on healing that's specifically focused on restoring and reorganizing tension in the nervous system. I know that's a mouthful.
Hey man, I was holding the door open. I got it all.
Cool.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's simple, right? So then, since it's so simple in a sense, right? Like eat right and exercise.
Right.
Why do most men not do that?
Yeah. There's a number of reasons why men don't do that. I think a lot of men just get in a rut and live
Mm-hmm.
what I call Groundhog's Day, where they just kind of like going through the motions, going to the same
Yeah.
job, going to the same routine, the same stores. And they look up and like a year, 2, 5, 10 years have gone by. And then they're in their 40s or middle age, have families, and are like, what the fuck happened? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a problem with also just people expect things to be easy. You know, I used to say in my healing practice, it's not Amazon Prime. Like you're not going to heal in 2 days or less. Like
Mm-hmm.
it got you this long to get to where you are. It's going to take a little while to get out of that. And men need to, it's like a pattern interrupt. And I don't think enough men experience that pattern interrupt until something either hurts too bad or the wife's walking out the door or whatever it is. And hopefully start to get that signal earlier.
Yeah, it's funny is I give gifts to new dads. And what I used to include, it just kind of brought back to me, what I used to include in that new gift is an Adam Sandler movie. I want to say it's called Click. That's what it's called. It's called Click. But
Right.
it's this movie about him, going through life trying to arrive. And so he got this remote and he'd skip through the birthdays and skip through all these things so he could work to get him the right house, get him all the stuff. And then at the end of the movie, he's divorced and his kids hate him, because he missed all the really important stuff. And
Yeah.
and so you talking about the Groundhog's Day made me think that, like, dude, pull your head out of Groundhog's Day, do an evaluation and kind of reset what matters most. And I love to have this idea of me at like 85 years old, looking in the mirror, going, okay, what did I do with my life?
Yeah.
And it's going to be less money and less career, unless it's going to be all,
It
wife,
always
kids,
is.
grandkids. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
hard when you're in it. It's hard when you're
Yeah.
in it on a Monday at, 10 a.m. to remember that.
Yeah. Well, something I thought about recently in this, you know, I've been focused like much in like the season of the warrior currently, right? Putting the reps in and like just committing and all those kinds of things. And that can seem very mundane and boring. And I had this epiphany about it where it's like finding gratitude in the mundane, right? Like, wow, how grateful I get to like wake up in that same bed every day and have
Yeah.
that same cup of coffee that's downstairs waiting for me because my wife made it for me and my son comes down to get ready for school. And it's like, that's my time with him. And it's like, wow, I love that I get day after day after day with that. So it was real like sort of paradigm shift for me to start looking at it in this way where it's like, okay, this may be the same thing over and over again, but how do I find gratitude in that? Like at our dinner table, the question we ask ourselves after we pray is what made your heart happy today? And that's the basis of our conversation. So although it's the same thing, repetition, like what it spurs is always very beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've missed as we've moved away from, like, I don't love the idea of religion per se, but there are these rhythms that can be helpful. And so like you say the Lord's Prayer, you go to church maybe on a Sunday and you could say it without even thinking about what it means. Just like at the dinner table, I could ask, what's your high or low? Or what's that makes your heart happy today? With just like, I checked it off the list. But if we can keep those rhythms with the heart and the why behind it, they're so valuable. They're so valuable.
I literally cry more times than not at the dinner table because of this exact energy, and I love letting my son see that, right? Like, I think as a man, not sharing or showing our emotions has been a real mishap in our culture, but that's a whole nother conversation. But these moments are really powerful, and it's these moments that we remember. We don't remember the huge wins, or even in business, like, okay, cool, but like that moment that you connected with your son and we had this like bonding and it's very powerful togetherness. I know that's a high value in my family, so that fills me up more than anything.
Tell me about the word togetherness. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So when right around the time our son was born, my wife and I took time to actually develop what our family values were. And I really encourage all fathers to do this because it's a guiding light. It's the pillars of, how we make our decisions about what we do in our life. And one of the highest family values we have is togetherness. Like, we really value being together and living life, having fun, adventure, spirituality, closeness, intimacy. All those things are related to that. But you physically have to be together to make that happen. And I see so
Right.
many families these days where, yeah, they're at dinner, but the kids are on the iPads. The parents aren't even talking to each other. It's like, well, you're kind of there together, but you're really not, right?
Yeah.
So, sorry, just trying to get this feeling of togetherness in reality, not just because we checked off the box, like you said.
Yeah. So good. So good. I love the idea of togetherness and the presence. Shift gears a little bit here, Michael. How old or how many years have you been married?
Just celebrated 11 years being married.
Nice. Now, if the guy who's listening right now is at 5 years, what is the thing you would tell him to be like, hey, dude, pay attention to this so that you make it to that decade mark?
Yeah, this is a really important question, especially at 5 years, right? Because that's where a lot of marriages fall apart. The number one thing I would say right off the bat is see each other new all the time. I think there's this tendency to just kind of, oh yeah, that's who you are. And there's like no excitement anymore. People become roommates. The intimacy drops out. You just sort of expect each other to be there. And also it kind of creates a very closed picture of what that person could be. So I think finding the newness all the time is really important and allowing each other to grow. I am not the same man I was when I got married 5 years into it. I am not the same man 10 years into it that I was when I got married. And a lot of that is because we've allowed each other to grow and change. But yet our core values are still there. So it's gonna be work. This is the other thing I'll say. Like there's no guarantees in marriage. Like, you have to put in the reps, you have to put in the work. And it just shows when you can go through something very challenging together and come out the other side. That tells a lot.
So next question is, how many kiddos do you have?
I have one.
And
One
how old is
kiddo.
he?
He's 9 years old. Yeah, just turned 9 back in June. So I'm in the 9-year change, if you're familiar with that.
Tell me what the 9-year change means for you.
Yeah. Well, my son attends a Waldorf school, so they have a very different approach to how they view the brain development and the body development in the child. And the 9-year change is a time when the astral body splits, the etheric body comes in. That's kind of how they talk about it spiritually. But basically what it is a time where the separation from the family and the mother actually happens psychologically, and the personality and the first dropping in of the ego starts to happen. So it's really where the child starts to see themselves as separate from the family unit. This is often where the reality of death starts to set in. We're like, wow, my parents could die, or I might be alone, right? Where before they're so connected to the family that they don't have that reality or experience. So it's just a rapid time of change psychologically for them. Sometimes they revert back to old behaviors, things like that. But it's a real powerful time. It's like, pre-adolescence. So it's a time where, who they really are starts to show itself for the first time.
And so for you as a father, how are you wanting to show up during this period?
Yeah, well, my basic rule for show up is 80% is being there. The 80-20 rule, physically just being there, being of support. And then the 20% is how I'm showing up. What I've learned as a father, and this was definitely not how I grew up, it's more active listening and not inserting my opinion about things or how it's supposed to be. I've learned to really step back from that and just hold space, I guess is the best way to put it, and listen. And I've learned so much more from my son in that way than what I think I need to teach him. That's kind of been my approach.
Powerful. Now, I'm gonna come back to your son in a second, but in your opinion, kind of expanding on the 80-20, or maybe it includes that, what is the primary role of the father?
Whew. Yeah, let's get right to it. to me, as a man, as a father, it's to provide and to protect. I mean, that is like the core pillars of what I feel like it means to be a father, right?
Yeah.
I think anyone can bring a child into this world, as a man, especially, because it's just a matter of our, genetics and all of that. But to really show up as a father is to be there, is to provide for them, right? And to protect and create an environment where they can thrive in. And, just kind of referencing back to the Waldorf thing, where it's like keeping the magic alive. I'm in this very interesting time where, like, especially, this year where there's an election, all that kind of stuff, where there's so many outside voices coming in. And my son brings some of that home and is asking me questions about things that he honestly shouldn't have to worry about or think about.
Right.
So I'm learning how to expand that sort of fortress of protection of energy around him. But it's tough because there's a lot of outside influences. So my role is to create that safe, magical place for as long as possible. So he gets to experience that natural, pure kind of life.
Love that. Michael, when did you embrace fatherhood? So I find, there's this moment you're trying for a baby, and then there's this moment you find out, oh, you're going to be a dad. And then 9 months later, there's this barbaric, magical miracle that happens. And then it might not be until you hold the baby, see the kid walk, see the kid talk. For you, when did you embrace this, like, this matters?
Yeah, great question. I think I resonated with all those points along the way that you just mentioned, but there was definitely a moment I remember where it fully clicked. And it was actually the first time I attended a men's weekend, which ultimately became my passion and thing that I wanted to bring to the world because it was that impactful. My son was about a little over a year old. And, I wanted a family, we had a very beautiful pregnancy and birth, natural at home, all that kind of stuff. And it was beautiful and we loved it. And, I was into it and all that, but like, I don't think it actually kicked in. Like you're a father and the maturity that needs to come with that. But it was like, as a lot of these things go, got a call from a friend that said, "Hey, I'm going to this weekend. I'm not really sure what it's all about, but would you want to attend with me? It's a men's weekend." And I said, "Yeah, I'll go." And I did. And that really woke me up to kind of my power, the things that were holding me back, and how I need to be showing up right now. Like I have a 1-year-old son that I'm nurturing and bringing up in this world. And I need to address myself and my stuff in order to show up for him. And I took that very seriously. I had a very powerful experience. I continued that work for a number of years, ultimately starting a group of my own because I felt it was that important, which is beautiful to live a very mission-based life. But that was a poignant weekend. That was definitely the time where, again, the child, he had been there for over a year, and it was just that real wake-up call, like get the message now, because how you're living is not going to serve this child or this family for very long.
Now, would you say that you were living in a way that was going to bring a lot of like chaos to the family, or were you just not living with intentionality?
I think there was more the chaotic. So at this time, when my wife actually found out she was pregnant, we had just bought a second chiropractic office in another city. Okay. So I basically bought this second practice and at the same time find out, oh, we're pregnant. And my wife didn't really do well in that first trimester and, was home a lot and couldn't help. So I was, she was taking care of herself. So I was stretched, man. I was all over the place. I was every week traveling back and forth between the Bay Area and all this. And it was chaotic, right? Because I wasn't there. I wasn't able to hold the space and be that grounding force, right? I believe that the father brings that sense of order to the home. It's part of our DNA is to bring order. It's like our kingly energy. So when things are in chaos or in flux or uncertain, that's the masculine role. And I was definitely in flux. And that went on for a little while until I finally made some major changes where I was like, I have to be home. Like I physically need to be there. So plug in the 80-20 rule again.
Yeah, but beautiful, because I think when I asked the question, I'm like, is this guy, out partying all the time and flying off the rails? You weren't. you were more, I'm working. And I think men fall into this, like, this is my duty as provider, is I'm going to
Right.
work 80 hours a week. That's my
Yeah.
duty. But you had this epiphany realization through your men's weekend that in doing that, you may be providing a paycheck, but you weren't providing, in your words, a sense of order or being a grounding force.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was a shift for you to do that. And then since then, you started your own men's group, which is Ignite, right?
Right. Ignite the King. Yeah.
Ignite the
Ignite with a
King.
K. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And so helping men to discover the same truth. And you said this, I think, a minute ago, the things that were holding you back from living with your full power.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I had no idea before that time, like what the shadow was or what limiting, I kind of knew what limiting beliefs were. I've been in the transformational world for a number of years through my chiropractic work, but this was the first time like someone like really got underneath all of that to like the core programming that was going on. And it was like nothing else I had ever experienced. And yeah, it was a huge wake up call to, if I don't make this change, this is going to continue on in my son and in my lineage. And before having a child, I didn't think about a legacy. I didn't think about any of that because there wasn't a physical form for this thing to go into. So once my son came around, it was like, what I often say to men is like, at that time, my life wasn't about me. It really was about pouring into this thing, which needs to also evolve because I think a lot of men, like you were just saying, can get lost in their work of providing and then miss out, and one of the top regrets of the dying is I wish I didn't work so hard. So I'm trying to learn those lessons a little earlier in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since we brought it up, what is your, maybe where do people learn about your men's group, and then what's your podcast?
Yeah, so it's all Ignite the King, IGKNIGHT. And we have a link tree I think I sent over to you that has our podcast, has our website, all that stuff. We run in-person events for men to go through this process. A lot of men we work with are becoming fathers or in new relationships where they want to set themselves up on the front end without making these mistakes that I know I've experienced many of. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we'll have all those notes in our links in our show notes too. Do you have a relationship with your dad now?
I do. My dad is about to turn 91 years old.
Woo! Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a strong man. Born out of the Depression in New York City, learned to live in the season of winter is how I put it. And go ahead.
So I got two questions for you about your dad, and you can answer them however you want. What's something you appreciated about your dad, and what's something you wish your dad would have done differently? Now, I asked the done differently somewhat loosely because I know most of us are like, I wouldn't change my past because it made me who I am today.
Sure.
But if you had to say, it'd be nice if he would have whatever, then what are those two things?
Yeah. Oh, we're going there. I love it. Could you ask me the first question again so I answer it in the way that you asked it?
What's something you appreciated about your dad?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate his show up. And I know this kind of goes back into the 80% thing. My dad was a teacher in Brooklyn for many years. I grew up on Long Island, and he was up at 4:00 every morning to meet the traffic every single day, to get to his job, to show up every day to provide for our family without waiver, without question. I don't think I ever see him calling sick once in my whole entire life. And he did that for 35 years. So I have a lot of respect for that, just consistent show up and being there. And I asked him years later, I actually did an interview with him a couple of years ago, as getting to be 90, 91 at that 90 at that time. And I was like, I want to capture some of this. And he shared something with me that was really profound, because I always wondered if he actually really enjoyed going to work and getting up early every day. And he's like, you want to know why I got up early? And I was like, why? I'm like, I thought you were beating the traffic. He's like, yeah, that was true. But he's like, I couldn't wait to get there. He's like, I just really loved what I did. And I just could not. He's like, I never understood why people were like waiting for the weekend or didn't want to work. He's like, I just loved it. So it was really cool to get that reflection later on, looking back from something from my childhood. what I wish she could have done better, I wish I got pushed a little more in certain directions. I know there's the other problem in our culture where parents will push their kids like in sports too hard, and kids will
Right.
rebel and not want to do it and like F you and all that kind of stuff. But there is the other end of the spectrum where I felt like I got into a lot of different things, but I was never like really directed into something. It was like, yeah, check everything out. And I wish there was a little more healthy pushing of like, oh, we see you got this gift. Let's really develop it. It felt like a very broad kind of touching on things, but never a lot of depth in something. And I wish that I don't know if that was necessarily even his responsibility, but looking back, I kind of wish I had some of that, because who knows where that could have led.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. I want to ask your opinion on something, because the last. Okay, I'll tell you where this came from. I went to Shabbat at someone's house recently, and so I've been digging more into this, like as like a Christian American. We don't really have much culture necessarily, but I saw this family that does this thing like every Friday night. So couple other things happened over the last 6 months where I've learned more about. At Shabbat, the father would pray a blessing on the child. And if you look like biblically, there's all this like Abraham blesses his sons. Like there's these really important moments where the father speaks identity into the kids, which is like what you're talking about. Like, I wish my dad maybe gave me some identity, or like called out, like, I see this in you, leadership or whatever. So the last 3 weeks, this is how fresh this is, I wrote these blessings for my kids. So on Sunday night, we do family dinner, and then I've prayed. So it's been 3 weeks that I've prayed this blessing over each one. But I sat down and wrote it out because I heard my friend Greg Gunn from Family ID about a month ago read one to his son, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is killer. And his son is 22. And so it was cool because I sat down to think about each of my kids and what's true about them. And then that's kind of like in the prayer, like, Violet, I see you as of a woman of blah, 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 blah. And so I'm reinforcing this truth about them. And so as you share that, because I kind of feel the same way, that my dad gave me a lot of freedom, which I see a lot of benefit to, but could there have been a little bit more guidance or speaking into my identity of like, this is who I see you as, which maybe wouldn't have maybe made me feel like it took so long for me to feel like I arrived at masculinity or manhood or whatever. So I don't know what resonates for you as I kind of share some of those things.
Yeah. I think we live in a new generation where doing things like what you're talking about are actually so important. And I think the older generation, especially my father, many generations back, that was not a thing, right? Kids were meant to be seen, not heard, right? And we now live in a culture where we realize, like, yeah, that's not really the best way to go about it. So I love that idea, and I love that, pouring into our children. In my work, we talk about these pillars of kingship. We hit on a few of them already, about blessing and about legacy, order and legacy. But blessing is another huge pillar where, as men in general, but especially as fathers, we need to be blessing into our children. We need to be pouring into them in the exact way that you're describing. And, there's other ways to do it too. But how many children, boys out there are just craving this blessing from older men in a real healthy, positive way. I mean, that's why sports is so successful, where, kids maybe don't have a father, and there's a lot of families without fathers. And then coaches become that role, and they see this child and they see his potential, and they pour into him and they bless him. And I think that's part of a boy becoming a man, and that going through that rite of passage is to get the blessing from the elders. It's to get that blessing and pouring into. And if you're doing that on a regular basis and have it written out, that's beautiful. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think if dudes are listening right now and you're like confused on like, oh, what's blessing mean? It's literally just speaking life into somebody. And I think what we can get caught up in as dads is, it's like, man, how many times do I walk in and be like, Brody, did you do your homework? Brody, you left the light on. Brody, your air conditioner's on. Brody, did you pick up the dog poop yet? Right. It's like through my whole week, it can be I'm coaching and teaching him, but to him, he's just like, my dad's constantly criticizing my every move, right? And so I think asking yourself, am I speaking life about my kid? Do I even see the truth about his creativity or his leadership or whatever?
Yeah.
And then what's your pin on this? Because I love sports, but also looking at sports is like, instead of, dude, you're the best pitcher on your team or whatever, where I'm talking about the actual action versus the character. What do you dig into when you think about, because it's like, well, as soon as the kid breaks his arm and he can't pitch anymore, shit, he's screwed.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on character versus like the actual action?
Yeah, it's such a delicate thing, isn't it, man? It's it's like, and do the compliments come from like something I need? I have to like check myself there, So a way
so stop on that. Explain that before that, because I think it's important for guys to hear. Are you just giving a compliment because it's something that you wish you were hearing yourself?
Exactly. It's like,
that's
I
powerful.
I think there's this sort of pitfall that we want to give our children a thing that we didn't have. And, it's like, they're different. They're not us. Right. Mm-hmm. And that could get very slippery, because then it sort of creates this feedback loop where we're trying to just actually fulfill something we never got. So a simple way that I approach this with my son is, and similar to how you talked about blessing into them, is I just try to witness him. I just share with him what I see. I see you doing this. I see how you did this. I see, when that kid was struggling on the field, that you went over and talked to him, or whatever it was. Like, point out, as you said, the character things, not like, oh, you threw 3 strikes. Although that's really cool.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, celebrate it.
Right. But if his identity is like, what if I throw a ball, I'm going to lose love? Like, it could be that fucking simple and that detrimental, right? Where if I do this, I get love. If I do this, love's withdrawn. That's a core program that can get put in there, especially as our children are young, because this is where they're laying down that hard wiring. So there's a level of consciousness that must happen as a father that frankly just didn't exist. We weren't aware of any of this,
right,
even 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I would say, dudes, as you're hearing this, you're like, oh my God, this is so much pressure, blah, 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 blah. Like, yes, own your responsibility, but at the same time, go back to Michael's 80-20. Like, bro, if you're in the stands, if you are home at 6 o'clock and at the dinner table, like, bro, you are killing it.
You're way ahead of the game.
Yes, you're killing it. So give yourself some grace, and then just admit when you mess up, like, admit it, because like we're all in this together. I love what you said, witness your kid. And I think that's a simple way, is for us to check ourselves. Are we witnessing just where they could improve? Or are we also witnessing, like you talked about, where they're excelling or where they're thriving?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, too often in life, we point out what's not working, or like you use the examples of like clean your room, put on the air conditioner, all those things. And it's like, what I've learned about physiology is our minds aren't designed to make us happy. They're designed to keep us alive. And most of us, because of just the data overload, we're in all day long, working this and that. We're constantly looking for what's not working. And we often will take that home and point that out to our wife or our family. And it's like, that's not the version of us that needs to show up at home. We need to be the more heart-centered, connected version of ourselves, where we're not looking for what's wrong. We're actually just, again, holding that space of peace and calm and order in the kingdom and experience what's going on. And I think men have a real hard time making that transition, making that shift where they bring their work home and it's just they're constantly on, and then our families are getting the brunt of that shit. And I've done that. I'm raising my hand because I've done that many times, and that makes me grouchy. It makes me not someone they want to be around. And fortunately, my family has vocalized that to me in the past, and I've been able to make that change. So, it has been that beautiful back and forth with that.
That's good. Is there something in the last, so since your kid was 1, you went to this men's, retreat, you've started to work with men. So over the last 8 years, has there been another moment where you were stuck in your ways, but because you're married and because you have a kid, it was like revealed to you that I'm going to shift from being stuck in my ways around something? Is there anything that you can come up with that you were stuck in your ways on? And here's why I asked the question, and I'll give you a minute to think about it, is I find sometimes men at 35, 40, 45, 50, or you look at that 60-year-old dude who's just like a freaking grouch because he's like, well, it's my way or the highway kind of thing, instead of being open to making a shift for the sake of the marriage, for the sake of the family. And I don't want to be that guy who's not willing to make shifts or adjustments for the sake of the whole family. So is
Yeah.
there anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, the thing that's popping, I don't know if it was an exact moment, but last summer, my family and I spent about 5 weeks overseas in Europe. Most of that time was in the south of France. And I know I have a tendency to want to control the situation. That's just my nature and how I grew up. And
Yeah.
being in a foreign country where I don't speak the language, where I'm not in my home, where, I had to give up a lot of what I thought was control of the situation or just our daily activity, right? We were in a very different rhythm. And I remember bringing some of the energy of control over there with me at the beginning because I hadn't kind of washed it off yet. Like I know you live in Hawaii. Like first thing I like to do is jump in the ocean there and get the city off of me,
Yeah.
So it was kind of like that where I needed to get into the Mediterranean. But I noticed I was carrying over like this sort of just rote energy, this control that I had brought with me. And I think there was a moment, I'm trying to remember now that you bring it up, where my wife and son were both like, we're over here. Like, you don't need, you can drop all that, like it was sort of like a pattern interrupt, I guess, where it was like, oh, I was just kind of in that mode and I could just be in the present moment and enjoy and have fun. And thankfully I did. And that mindset has carried over into, and that was over a year ago that we were there doing that, has really carried over to just allow. I mean, I think I heard it recently on some meme or something where it was like, you're going to miss those fingerprints on the window. You're going to miss when everything's left out, right? I'm sure you've heard of many of those things. And it's like, so I've just really dropped into enjoying that, that there's going to be a time where he moves on in his life and I'm not going to be a father like I am now, and just enjoy it. Like really soak up every moment. So that experience last year really was a big shift again at another level of just being present with my family is really what it comes down to.
Dude, that's so good. And what I hear and want to challenge dudes listening is to take a pause from your rhythm. Like whether that's going to Europe or it's doing something, like take a pause from your rhythm, because dude, if you just do the same thing every day forever, you never are pulled out of your zone to be able to evaluate and maybe be challenged on like, dude, you're controlling, and so a Sabbath or a rest or a pause, whatever you want to call it, but those shifts, really important. Michael, this podcast is called Fatherhood Field. Did you want to say something about that?
I was just thinking more riffing on it where, I also noticed in that travel with my son that he changed, right? Where he was at, because, he's at the time 7, 8 years old, where he had to experience the world a whole lot. So for him to be so out of his connection to his rhythms allowed us as a family to really grow together. And, one of our high values is adventure and travel. So we were fulfilling that. And in that, it's like our closeness became tighter, how we related became better because we were all in a different experience. So to your point of like breaking out of that regular rhythm or routine for the child as well as us as parents was huge.
Yeah, I think exposing them to the world to whatever capacity you can, like travel like that is so eye-opening for the kiddo. It's huge.
Yeah. It cures ignorance.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, for them to see it's more than just your little world. All right, this podcast is Fatherhood Field Notes. You've been doing it, just sharing your life with us. The mantra behind it is rebel and create. This idea that as men, we're warriors. We want to fight, but not just to go be destructive and bring chaos, but to create something beautiful out of it. So what's something that you are rebelling against, tearing down, so that you can create something beautiful in its place?
Yeah. This is a deep question. It definitely relates to some of the things we've been talking about. And for me, it's rebelling against this energy neutrality, this just accepting that this is how life is, or I'm at this point in my life or age and it's supposed to be like this, and kind of getting into this Groundhog's Day syndrome of the day after day. And so I'm really rebelling against just average mediocrity, neutrality. And I think that ties into that deeper stuff you're asking about my father and feeling like I was just average. I was just neutral. And it was like, okay, but there's so much more. And I see a lot of men that just sort of accept that as they get to, in their 40s and stuff like that, where it's like they just sort of accept mediocrity. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
absolutely 100% rebelling against that.
I love that. And why? Why is that important to you?
Because it doesn't advance our evolution. It's like, I don't want to pass along to my son that this is okay. And that's okay just to be okay. Like, I want to show him extraordinary. I want to show him energy rich. I want to show him, like we talk about, adventuring around the world, like passion, excitement, all the things I had to learn in my own relationship. I want him to get from an early age because, we only get, as far as I know, one turn on this thing. So I want to maximize it.
And I love that answer because I think some guys are like, you know what, I'm okay. I don't really want to fight too hard for my marriage. I just kind of shut my mouth, put my head down, do my thing, do the same at work. I'm not, but the question I think we could ask ourselves is, do you want that for your son when he's 35 or 40 or 45? And the answer is going to be like, well, not really. Well, then you got to go do the work so that he can see that the work can be done. Right. And set him up with a better foundation. It doesn't mean he's not still going to have to do work, because life is work. Like everything good and joyous is work. But I like that. Like, do you want your daughters to be married to a guy like you? Do you want your son to be married and have the fulfillment you have? And if not, then like go pursue what that looks like and show them the way.
Absolutely. We often hear men will say, I'll die for my children. I'll die for my family. And that's a beautiful, noble thing. But my question back to that is, well, will you live for them? Right? Will you actually show them what it's like to be alive, right? And command that level of pride in yourself and them.
Yeah. And dying for somebody, like to jump on a grenade, I get it. But to die every day to your selfishness for the sake of the family, like that's living right there. And that doesn't mean be a passive bitch. It's not what we're saying. It's die to the selfishness and like, how do I show up for those around me? Like, these people have been placed in my care, right? I'm a king. What am I going to do about it?
Yeah. You're a guardian.
I love it. Guardian. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just say guardian and duty. I mean, this is our role as men. It's a sacred honor to me, right? I always found it weird when I'd find men or fathers just complaining about their wives or complaining about family life or making jokes around having to show up. And I'm like, I frankly don't surround myself with people like that anymore unless they're coming in to be helped. But it's like, I don't see it that way. I see fatherhood as a sacred obligation, a rightful duty that I'm here as a man to do. And it was that experience that I talked about that men's weekend that woke me up to that. And then, like you said, it was a lot of work after that. It wasn't like one weekend, it was done. It was like, that just made me aware of the challenges and exposed the wound. Now it was my work to do it, and there are times I have to step away from my family and say, I need to go do my work so that I can be present. And the last thing I'll say to that is there's a lot of men that are like, just unwilling to face what they have to face. And just like you said, accepting that it's just okay. And I'm not okay with okay.
Love it. Michael, this has been such a phenomenal conversation. Thank you. The work that you've done to pause and share that with the fathers listening, to encourage them to step into the truth of who they are and just to continue to do the work.
Thank you.
My final question for you is a legacy question. And imagine 30 years from now, you are standing outside in a cul-de-sac peering into your son's home. So he is now 40 years old, halfway through his life. As you look through the windows, what do you see being played out in his home that just fills you with joy? You're like, yes, I showed up and this is good.
Ned, you got me chicken skin all over, brother. That's a great question. As you said that, I almost got the image of how I would look into my current home. Like just that 2.0, where I'm seeing him show up in a way that he saw me show up, because I know inherently, and I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, but it's like, that would bring me a lot of joy and pride, because that so many men are trying to do what didn't happen for them. and to be in a situation where it's like, no, he showed me the way, and it's the right way, and now this is my version of it. But you know, it's like that practice where in the coaching world, people say, well, what's your perfect day, right? Like a lot of coaches start with that because they want to help you get to your goals. And I would find that I would be describing my current life, right? And if my son could experience that just in his own way, and have that family around him, and feel like he was raised in a way where he can show up fully for them, that would be pretty awesome. Yeah.
Beautiful.
There probably more dogs there.
Yeah, more dogs. Dude, Michael, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Appreciate the work you're doing to go help men see who they are. Once again, people check out Michael's podcast, the Ignite Weekend for Men. And dude, just blessings to you, your family, your marriage, your relationship with your kids, and just thank you for being the man that you are.
Thank you for having me. It's beautiful to share, and thank you for what you're doing in the world, brother.
All right, man. Until next time. What an incredible conversation. Really, the things that stuck out to me afterwards that I'm like kind of reflecting and resonating with is this idea of togetherness. You know, thinking through, am I not just checking it off the list to be with my family, but am I actually being with them? And I love this word togetherness, like we're together doing life purposefully, intentionally. The other thing I really liked is this idea of witnessing my child. So like, am I witnessing the things that they're doing? Not just where they could grow, but am I also witnessing where they have grown? And right, I want people to notice that Ned is a grown version of Ned 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Now, one question I challenge you with is, are you only seeing your shortcomings, or are you celebrating your personal growth? And so maybe it starts with you celebrating how far you've come and not just continuing to go like, well, I could be a better dad. When you walk away from these podcast conversations, feel encouraged for the work you've already done, and then feel inspired based on what's possible. But that we be content in a sense here and now with who we are today, because you and I have grown so much as men, as fathers. All right, my friends. If you enjoy these, please write a review. And if you enjoy them, please share it with a friend. Shoot a text over. Hey, bro, I see you as a father at this, that, or the other. You're a great dad. I listen to these podcasts every once in a while. I think you'd enjoy it. It helps spread the word that fatherhood matters. And it's a way to give an attaboy to a friend who is showing up as a dad, because most of us are not getting those pats on the back. Thank you to all you dads out there listening to Fatherhood Field Notes podcast. What you do matters. Do not be like everybody else. Be yourself. That is who your kids, spouse, and community needs. This is your guide, Ned Shout. Together, let's rebel against the view that fatherhood has little impact and create lives engaged in mastering the craft of fatherhood. I look forward to hanging out with you next time.